Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Wednesday, April 22nd, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. How many running backs will go in the first round of Thursday's NFL draft, and could the Chiefs be in the market for one? Star columnist Vahe, Gregorian, and I talk about the evolution of the position on the field and in the draft on today's episode. Okay, two things before we get started. I'm doing a little post-production editing here. In our conversation, I mentioned to Vahe that the last running back to be selected first overall was Bo Jackson in 1986. Well, Bo was first that year, but in 1995, Penn State's Kajana Carter was taken first overall. Sorry to mislead you, Vahe. The second heads up is this. I mentioned early in my conversation that we're covering several topics today. That turned out to be not true. We spent so much time chatting about running backs that we ran long, and we'll save the rest of our conversation for Thursday. Please tune in then when Vahe and I cover a couple more draft-related topics. So let's get started with today's chat with Vahe. All right, Vahe, are you ready for a draft?
Well, Blair, I think the draft is always interesting, and I dare say it's been perhaps elevated in the minds of some, given the place it occupies in the sports landscape this time around.
Well, let's just say that on the night that sports stopped for most of America, and certainly for us, March 11th or 12th, whatever that day was, we haven't covered a sporting event since then. And in that time, we would have covered many NCAA tournament games, opening day for the Royals, spring training for the Royals, and then opening day. There would have been events to cover. There hasn't been one for almost 6 weeks.
Yeah, and it's strange. Now that you say this, I might be forgetting something, but I think the last sporting event I covered that counted was the Super Bowl.
Really? Because
I went down to spring training. I was there for a week or so, had a week vacation. I don't think I covered any basketball, just as we were getting ready for doing some stuff leading up to NCAA tournament time. I think the last event I covered was the Super Bowl.
How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something that I've thought of.
Game-wise, right? Yeah.
Right. Just being at a game and writing a column.
Game that counted, yeah.
My wife Karen and I heard last night on the news that the COVID-19 was in the Bay Area a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks before it was the first death in Seattle, which I think was February 29th. Karen and I were in the Bay Area on the last weekend in February, and we just thought, how about that?
Well, how about that? I saw that report, and I've thought about this a little bit, and I don't need to take us too far afield here, but I mean, we went to Mexico on that trip. That trip in mid-February, as far as I know, it was untouched time and all that, but it reminds you that you don't know what was where when, and,
right?
And that's how sinister and insidious this whole thing is.
I think we were both on planes that weekend.
Yeah, that's true. I think we figured out we might even been on planes on the same day or somewhere in there.
Right.
And this was a really weird episode, but honestly, now that I'm thinking about this, we were on a plane to Mexico through Houston. A person died on our plane flight. It was a person who got on the flight very ill. Now,
elderly person.
We have no reason to think it was or wasn't this virus, but it does make you wonder, what was the root cause. My wife, being the former reporter and actually current reporter that she is, did follow up with the Houston health authorities to find out the cause of death, and it was a heart disease. Anyway, I told you I wasn't going to go far afield here, and look at me now.
Well, it's going to be great to have a live sporting event over the weekend, starting Thursday, and of course with the first round of the NFL draft, which continues with rounds 2 and 3 on Friday, and then 4 through 7 on Saturday. Herbie Teope and Sam McDowell, who are our day-to-day beat writers for the Chiefs, were talking. We were talking for a podcast earlier this week how different it's going to be for the NFL. Roger Goodell is going to be in his home in Westchester, New York, And, of course, the Chiefs, like all the 31 other NFL teams, will be working out of their homes, right? Brett Veach, Andy Reid, they'll all be working out of their homes to conduct the draft. And that's going to present challenges and issues. But one thing I didn't talk to them about that I wanted to ask you is it's going to be different for us, too, and for the media covering the draft, because we'll be working out of our homes, maybe some in offices, but not at the site, not on site. We're always at the Chiefs facility over by Arrowhead, and we won't be there this year, which will make it a different and maybe a little more challenging event to cover.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's kind of interesting. As long as we've worked together, and this is our first year working with Herbie on the draft, but there becomes sort of a certain innate sense of communication on, okay, here's where we're going to go and who's going to do what, and you kind of feel it out, but it always gets clarified. There's always talked through, and I think we're going to be on multiple platforms of communication, but as we speak about this right now, it occurs to me we don't have one set up just for Herbie, Sam, Blair, and Vahe to be talking about who's writing what right now.
No.
I mean, that's a little too much inside baseball here, but
that's how we work, though, because we're in a confined space in the press facility, which that's a whole another topic of conversation that will attack the confined space of the Chiefs media room and how that might change in a post-COVID world.
Well, that's right. And look, this was before my time, and I think you were certainly doing some stuff with the Chiefs, but not as much as you've been doing now. It's my understanding that 7, 8, 10 years ago that there was a much more spacious area granted to the media in there, but then they kind of kept trying to move the media farther outside the zone,
right,
so to speak. And now it is a pretty small room. I mean, and when you have people coming in from all over the country during the week for Chiefs media conferences, there's really not enough room to work.
Used to be in the press box, and which is very spacious. But that'll, I'll tell you what, I'm looking forward to the time where we can have a discussion about when we can get back to cover the team on a, on that sort of basis.
Absolutely.
So what we don't know exactly. We'll cover the draft like we always have. We'll report the Chiefs' picks and what's going on in the NFL, and if the draft order holds for the Chiefs, it's going to be a long night with the Chiefs drafting last in the first round, which is a great thing because 32 is reserved for the Super Bowl champion, and unless the Chiefs trade out of it, that's where they're going to pick, which will end the first round of the draft, and then it'll be past our print deadlines. I don't think you'll see anything in the Friday editions of the Kansas City Star. It'll be all over kansascity.com with several stories. But there is something a little bit different about our coverage of the draft this year, and you and I happen to be practicing good social spacing, sitting in a studio at the Star where you will be part of a program that will last as long as the first round of the draft, in which we come to you on Facebook Live and talk about the draft. The Chiefs and other McClatchy newspapers in our chain, and that's about 6 or 7 other represents 6 or 7 other NFL teams, and we're going to talk to reporters, sports editors, columnists from those papers about their teams and about the draft in general. For instance, the Miami Dolphins, the Miami Herald is a McClatchy newspaper. The Dolphins have 3 picks in the first round, so there'll be plenty of Dolphins discussion. Fort Worth Star-Telegram, former Kansas City Star reporter Clarence Hill covers the Cowboys, so there'll be plenty of Cowboys chatter, and several other teams will fall into that category. And like I said, you will be on the telephone speaking to us about your impressions of the draft and what the Chiefs might do, what other teams have done. It's going to be a different sort of evening for you, and I'm hoping that your telephone line stays open.
Well, I'm hoping the Wi-Fi is working well. And up on our 3rd floor of our house, where my office room is, it sometimes fades in and out. Not conveniently, by the way, just fades in and out. So we got a little Netgear power booster yesterday to see about that. And I think the word to the wise in any of these situations, deadline situations with moving parts, is stay nimble. And I think we're going to we're going to find ourselves needing to be, and I'm sure we'll be more nimble than ever. But it's going to be, I think, a very interesting process for you in particular as kind of the helmsman of the operation. I think you're going to be doing what do they call it, a whirl around, where you're
is that what they call it? Well, some people would call it something else. I see it more as a traffic cop sort of thing. There'll be some time to fill, that's for sure. 10 minutes between picks in the first round, 32 selections in the first round. Not every team has a first-round pick, but there are 32 selections, so there'll be some space to fill, and I'm hoping that we can use today's conversation to test drive a couple of topics that you might hear again on Facebook Live Thursday night, and we'll see if they work. The first one I wanted to hit. One is they're all somewhat Chiefs related. But I think we can stretch them out also to include some national perspective. But let's start with this, Vahe. When you and I, we are of the same age and grew up football fans at around this, in the same frame, right, time frame, early 70s into the 70s, that sort of thing. The running back was a glamour, if not the glamour position in pro football. Yeah. I don't know if I knew every NFL's team's quarterback, but I knew who their star running back was. When you got a pack of football cards when you were a kid, you were looking for that. You were looking for Earl Campbell, or you were looking for the Walter Payton. You were looking for the star running back, and the draft reflected that. Running backs, NFL teams coveted running backs, and I think the list that I came up with was the overall number one pick in the NFL draft over a 26-year stretch included 9 running backs, more than any other single. I didn't, quarterbacks probably are first in that. There are a lot of defensive players. I didn't do the other positions, but 9 out of 26 that started like in maybe the early 60s, going through the 70s and into the early. I think I stopped it with Bo Jackson in '86,
and you stopped it there for a reason. Not only is Bo of great interest in Kansas City, but also that was the last number one overall running back, the last
since 1986.
Startled me when I saw that when you sent me this infographic you did. That was I would never have guessed that would have been the last overall number one.
Yeah, and listen, there have been some terrific running backs in the NFL since then, some MVP type players, but nobody who a team believes should be the overall number one pick in an NFL draft. I think there are a few reasons for this. I think currently, and if we can dial back for a few years, the role of the running back has changed a little bit, not used as often. But I also think that there is a financial consideration and a usage situation with running backs as well. No player on a football team seems to be more used. It's a poor choice of words, but the wear and tear on a running back is a different type of wear and tear than there is on other players. Yeah,
and I think I got thinking about this through some of your prompts, and correct me if I'm wrong on this right away, but I can't think of a guy other than Derrick Henry right now that is the 35 carry a game guy, one guy, right? I mean, maybe I'm just not thinking of somebody.
No, well, Ezekiel Elliott with the Cowboys is a valuable player, one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in the NFL. But Derrick Henry is certainly the.
But maybe he's the prototype of the offense is built around the running back.
Yeah.
I mean, again, there's maybe Elliott's probably a good example of a sort of counterpoint, but really, and that speaks to, as you noted, the whole evolution in offenses. That's part of it. Also with that, though, I think is this discovery. It's a little bit of the science of the game. Like, these guys get beat up in ways over time that what position do you get more beat up?
You don't. I think they get. Listen, linemen obviously make contact on every play, but they don't absorb the type of contact that a running back does.
Yeah, it's a different form of thing, and I think this is not at all to diminish the physicality of what linemen go through, but it's a different kind of impact, different kind of just physics to it, and so play after play after play after play. So most teams, consequently, are not just focused on one back to get the carries, right? We've seen a lot of that. The other notion that seems to have emerged, I think, too, is that you consider all that stuff, and the shelf life for these guys, the average is like 4 years. And generally speaking, the thinking has become that you can get a guy second round and up that is just as capable. You don't have to use a first round pick on it. Guys like Jamal Charles was a third round pick, I think.
He was.
Just things like that. I think but it's interesting how a trend sort of began and then it sort of begot more, right? And I think it's just become the standard thinking now. Like, we don't have to spend a first round pick on this. There's very few running backs that will change the complexion of a game the way you might see a quarterback or receiver even be able to do now.
So was it Sykov Barclay for Penn State was the number 2 pick a couple years ago, and he's had a terrific start to his NFL career. Now, it hasn't helped the Giants in the win-loss column,
right?
But he's been really good. But that position doesn't seem to change a team's fortune obviously like a quarterback does, or even a good rush end.
Yeah. Right.
But that's not the way we used to think of it. We used to think, boy, you get the running back who led the NCAA in rushing as a senior, you've got you really got something. Yeah,
and look, I mean, I guess it really does go. I don't have these numbers in front of me, and you might, knowing you and the computer on your head, that you can kind of come up with these things from memory. But whatever it was, the tipping point was on the evolution into a more pass-happy game. I mean, when we were growing up, probably 25 passes a game was sort of the coin of the realm.
Right.
And now
and to lead the league in touchdown passes was usually somewhere in the high 20s.
Yeah. I mean, remember when Patrick broke Len Dawson's touchdown record, by 15 touchdown passes.
By 20. Dawson had 30. Yeah.
Dawson had 30. That's right, and he wasn't even the record holder, right? It was Trent Green.
No, Dawson had the record at 30.
Okay.
At 30, that was the Chiefs' team record for touchdown, and that was set in the 60s.
Yeah, so I mean, think about that. Now more games now, et cetera, but it's a completely different game today, and whatever that average passing number is now, it's got to be in the 40s or high 30s or 40s, and so you just run less. You don't. It's the theory of the Bo Schembechler theory of 3 things happen when you pass, 2 of them are bad. I don't think that's how people think anymore.
No.
In fact, you can make a case, and we've talked about this a little bit with the show, the bit we did with Therese and Sam Mellinger about how the whole Chiefs premise on drafting Patrick was, we're going for it, and you're going for it with this. You're going for it with the arm and the brain and all that the quarterback can change in a game. Going for it isn't getting the best running back available. It's just not the case.
No, it's not the case. It isn't. And I'm just, I couldn't come up with names earlier, but all of a sudden I'm thinking of John Riggins and Marcus Allen and Franco Harris, Super Bowl winning type of players back in the day. And it just occurred to me, I know there was a debate after the Chiefs Super Bowl that maybe Damian Williams should have been the MVP of the game and not Patrick Mahomes. But I think that speaks to what an unusually good productive game that a running back had in a Super Bowl to go over 100 yards rushing. It just doesn't seem to happen much anymore.
And look, I think that debate was a pretty pure, reasonable debate to have. I mean, there's a million ways to break down what happened in those last minutes of the game. And I do think the overriding thought people mostly had, though, is they couldn't have won that game without Patrick. Now, if you really look at Damian Williams' game, I don't think they could have won that game without him.
I don't think so either. No.
So it's not really whatever the term is, one or the other.
But it was a terrific game by a running back who has served the Chiefs well, who the Chiefs didn't draft.
Which is sort of a reiteration of the point, and doing it in Miami, which didn't care to keep him.
Right. So Chiefs running backs drafted in the Andy Reid regime, Andy Reid's John Dorsey / Brett Veach regime. In 2013, they took Nile Davis in the third round.
Third round, right? Yeah.
Yep. They also took Brayden Wilson, who was a Kansas State fullback, in the 6th round. He didn't make it through the preseason, but basically 2 backs in that. In 2014, DeAnthony Thomas was drafted. He's listed as a running back. I didn't see him as a running back, more of a slot guy, return specialist. But after that, Kareem Hunt in the 3rd round in 2017 and Darwin Thompson in the 6th round last year. So if you just true running backs, I'd say Nile Davis, Kareem Hunt, Darwin Thompson, 3 in 7 years. There was a stretch for the Chiefs, a 10-year stretch from 1994 when Greg Hill was their 1st-round pick. And Donnell Bennett, by the way, 2nd-round pick. So they took running backs with their 1st and 2nd picks in 94. 94 through 2003, they took 12 running backs. The Chiefs did. Some mostly forgettable, but the final one in that group was Larry Johnson, who was they took in the 1st round in 2003. Productive few seasons for the Chiefs, but that's the last time the Chiefs took a running back with their top pick. I just find the whole thing really interesting and quite an evolution in football.
Absolutely, and look, you're probably going here in a minute, but an interesting aspect of this is, all right, so what does this bode or mean or potentially signify for what the Chiefs might be looking at here, right, among other things? Well, it seems to suggest there will be really good running backs available at number 32. If you feel that this is a chance to, if that is your greatest need or whatever that matrix they're going to use in terms of, X talent fitting our scheme, fitting whatever. I mean, however they're going to look at it, that we don't quite have that secret sauce. I think there's as good a chance as any they might do something like that. It depends on the guys left there. It depends on if 3 of those 5-6 top guys are already gone for some reason. But be interesting to see how they approach it.
I think it's an option for the Chiefs if a DeAndre Swift from Georgia or Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin are on the board at 32. If the Chiefs consider a running back there, Taylor of Wisconsin is sort of a prime example of a college player who defines what we spoke about earlier in terms of wear and tear. He rushed for over 2,000 yards twice at Wisconsin in a season. He has over 6. I think he's got
7 yards, 6.5 yard average.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you talk about a guy who they rode at a school. It was Taylor, and so does he come into the NFL with what's the lifespan of a NFL running back who as a rookie, even as a rookie with that sort of mileage on him?
Well, it's a great question, right? On one hand, you could see him as semi-seasoned. On the other hand, you could say this guy's already damaged goods, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's not evident yet. It's a great question. It's right at the crux of any question they have to ask themselves. It is interesting to think about what the Chiefs' level of need is there, right? In one sense, you have a feeling of a little bit of depth there, but on the other, I don't know. I mean, what do you really feel about everybody after Damian Williams? I mean, if Damian Williams were hurt,
and he was hurt last year,
and he was,
led the league, led the Chiefs in rushing with 400 plus yards.
Right.
Had the great, again for the second straight year, terrific postseason.
Yeah, I mean, we don't quite know enough about Darwin Thompson to think that he's a step right in guy and good to go. Everybody else just seems fairly pedestrian to me, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not thinking this through enough on who's shown what.
Well,
but
I do think that the Chiefs have convinced themselves that they can find a running back elsewhere. They can find a free agent running back.
Right.
Where they did that with they got Spencer Ware in a trade with the Seahawks. They picked up Charkandrick West. Those guys led the team in rushing in back-to-back seasons.
Yeah.
I just think the Chiefs look at that position. The way they look at interior offensive line is you don't necessarily need to use draft capital on that position.
I was just going to mention that thought too, that it applies similarly to what they've done. I mean, they've certainly obviously Eric Fisher and Mitch Morse, and there have been a couple other linemen drafted I'm not thinking of offhand.
Well, Nick Allegretti last year, who
Nick,
basically took a redshirt year.
Yeah, but you look at the makeup there, they've been happy to go out.
Yeah, especially inside. I think as long as they feel like they've got the tackles set and they do with Schwartz and Fisher, that the interior, those guards and tackles. I know they gave the contract to Laurent Duvernay-Tardif.
Yeah. But
there was some talk after the season that he might be a guy who was expendable for salary cap reasons. He'll be back, but they did some. Remmers is in because Wisniewski is out, and Andrew Wiley will be back. There's just been some movement on the interior part of the offensive line for the Chiefs that may not that doesn't in terms of just acquiring talent, it's different there than other places. It's just the Chiefs don't use the draft often for those players. So
yeah.
Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners: unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. That'll do it for today. Thanks to our production team of Derek Donovan, Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. As was mentioned in the show, we're going live with the NFL Draft. Join us. You can access through the Star's Facebook page. That's facebook.com/Kansas City Star on Thursday starting at 6:45 p.m. We got a lot of interviews and features planned. But before then, we'll have another SportsBeat KC episode. On that, you'll hear the final projection for the Chiefs' first-round pick by Star beat writer Herbie Teope. So join us Thursday morning for that show.